Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of VNture Podcast, the visual novel podcast brought to you by Taros, that's me, and MR. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we have ourselves a guest on our hands. He is coming back in the YouTube sphere, and I would like to hand it off to him to introduce himself to everyone. It is Brucegoneloose.
And it's great to be here. Thank you very much. I'm mostly known for my YouTube reviews, but I do other sorts of visual novel content, and I'm very passionate about visual novels in general, so yeah.
Oh man, and we've been in contact for a while now. The time flies, but please tell us, Bruce, let's go loose today, okay? Tell us, what's your origin? What made you start reading VNs? And with that, what made you create content?
If it's all right with you guys, can I start with how I got started in creating content?
Sure.
Before the VNs?
Sure.
So many years ago, back in 2006, one day my friend came over to my house and he was like, oh yeah, you should check out this new site. And it was YouTube. And immediately I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I eventually started doing content. I was still pretty young at the time, so nobody wants to see that. But off and on since about 2010, I've been creating content for random video games and whatnot. But I didn't really get my start into visual novels until 2020, technically. I did read some here and there, like Doki Doki Literature Club, of course. That's how everyone gets their start. But I really didn't start until Katawa Shoujo and Moe Era, as you could tell from my early videos. But that was my main introduction to the visual novel sphere. And then I realized Japanese visual novels exist. And I went down the rabbit hole, and here we are.
I mean, later on, I know you made some videos in which you talk about your approach to content creation. Do you feel like it changed over the years? Or would you say you always had that impulsive approach?
It's always been impulsive. And I want to say, like, since my last uploaded video, since I took a break over December, it's changed since then. Like, I don't know about a lot of other content creators, but I constantly watch the new popular stuff. Some people don't like it, but I get a lot of inspiration from that kind of thing. And you can kind of see how my content has evolved even since 2020, where I start with very basic reviews that were inspired by my earlier content creator days. Now I'm sort of blending into more modern YouTube, if that makes sense.
Yeah, where the later videos start to become more about a personality type, like you highlighted over yourself, right?
Yeah, and that's a whole topic that I could really get into about like different sorts of content. But I've kind of turned into a content creator that not only, well, for one, I'm just putting myself out there with my camera these days, but for two, I really want to make content that is interested not only to visual novel fans, but also people out there, because I find a lot of the best YouTube content is content you can just absorb, even if you're not necessarily interested in the sort of thing that it talks about. Does that make sense?
So you think about a content that is directed more or less to VN fans, but is approachable by complete novice who has no experience in the genre.
Exactly.
Okay.
And like that's the sort of thing that, well, I want to say the popular YouTubers do, but I'm not doing this for popularity. My main goal is to I really hope I can get people into visual novels with my content. That's kind of my future, or I want that to be my future approach to content, you know?
Okay. Yeah, because when you mentioned that you wanted to get people into visual novels, there's, a wide variety of visual novels out there, and there's a variety of fans who all approach the medium with different interests in mind. like I think the most obvious split is that you have some people who are really hardcore into the whole classics and whatnot, like going into Clanad, we're checking out stuff like Tsukihime, and then you have a very casual crowd who's only have the passing knowledge of stuff like Doki Doki Literature Club or Danganronpa. So when you have those two very distinct audiences, perhaps more, and you mentioned that you want your videos to try and get people into visual novels, does that make a difference of like what kind of audience you're reaching out to? Is that something you have to consider when you make your content?
It's not only something I consider, it's something that I've spent months and months on. I think a lot. I'm kind of known for taking breaks with my content, but it's not that I'm not trying to produce content. It's that I'm trying to figure out that problem. That was what most of 2023 was for me, trying to figure out how to blend, content that would be interested to both groups. And I kind of realized you can't, So I think going forward, I'd prefer to maybe do some videos for the more classic crowd, but I'm more interested in casual crowd and trying to like rope them into other visual novels. That's going to be my that's my general approach right now.
You want to take the role of some sort of gateway drug, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like I don't know about you guys, but I've watched some YouTubers do content that I had otherwise no interest in, but like it was an interesting title, it was an interesting thumbnail. I clicked it, just on a whim, and all of a sudden I'm hooked. I want that to be my kind of content for people for VNs so they can get into it.
Ooh, interesting. That is not an easy task.
It's not. No, it's been something that I've been pondering for about a year and a half, and especially visual novels are very, I want to say, a stuck genre. Like it's like we're getting translations, we're getting not that bad amount of content, but at the end of the day, like we're not necessarily a thriving genre either, and it's really hard to interest even just anime fans into visual novels because a lot of people don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to say they don't want to read, but you know what I mean. It's a difficult genre to get into.
You feel like inherently VNs have an innate barrier to entry that isn't really welcoming to newcomers.
Yeah, and amongst other things, it's probably mostly the time spent. Like everyone likes the Clannad anime, but even then, nobody wants to read 60, 70, 80 hours, however long it takes you to read it for the full experience, even if it's technically better, Well, in my opinion, I should say my opinion.
No, yeah, no, I don't mind about that, going arguments with the anime or the VN, because goodness knows we have plenty of those already. I think the bigger fact is that, like you mentioned, there is such a difference between typical anime mediums, like anime, like movies, like even light novels, that make them so much different than visual novels, which is kind of in a very different vein of literature, of wanting to read. They're closer to books than they are to the whole anime and weeb fandoms, to be honest. And so it's kind of difficult to make that breach into two entirely separate interests. Because reading is a huge time sink. It's a very different experience than you typically get out of the anime stuff like video games and anime weekly episodic series. And so basically I wanted to ask how that tied into your YouTube videos and how you approach your content.
That's
you mentioned
really
how you
question.
want people to watch a video and get hooked like you have in certain aspects. And basically, I just think that the whole literary aspect of visual novels make it a lot more difficult to get in hooked as a hobby compared to some of the other stuff you've gotten hooked into.
That's a very good question, and I completely agree in the entire premise. It's really hard to get people hooked into literary things in general that I found. Especially with YouTube, because the problem is with YouTube videos, you can't really show people the the feeling, everything that a visual novel can give to you. Because at the end of the day, like it's just if you just take some random visual novel screenshot, it's just anime girls and some text. Now you can say that about anime too, technically, but it's hard to get people interested in it. And yeah, again, like this is something that I've been pondering on a lot. To be honest, I haven't figured out the answer. I don't really know. I want to target more casual audiences, but at the same time, I feel like maybe visual novels are just a genre that you might happen upon. Like maybe you watch Clannad, for example, and then you read Clannad, and then you might be interested in other visual novels. But it's a very hard genre to just get people to get interested in for no reason. So to answer the basis of your question, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just trying to do it.
That's all we can ask out of anyone. We're all just making our way through.
Sure, exactly. And I want to push back a little bit on what Tauros said about the VNs being closer to books, right? Because there's one aspect of VNs that is common, but is unique to them, unlike books, unlike anime, or at least majority of the anime, is that they tend to have multiple stories in them. What I mean by that is mostly commonly referred as routes. And the question to you, Bruce, going from that, is do you feel that focusing on those titles that don't have complex systems and have more of a straightforward narrative is the way to go to make people hooked and, start with the VNs? Or maybe just showing that possibility of shaping your own story is the defining factor you could hook someone in with?
Going back again to Clannad, every time my friends, for example, they watch Clannad, and I say, hey, you should read the visual novel. And they're like, why? And then I say, well, you can have a route for this girl, Kyo, you can have a route for this girl. That's, again, it's one of the huge features of visual novels. And I feel like maybe we should emphasize that more, especially in YouTube videos. I've thought about that. But at the same time, what am I trying to say here? I don't think people will get interested just based on that.
I mean, it's also, like you were mentioning, it's hard to showcase visual novels. You can tell people that, hey, there's a route for your favorite girl to romance, but in a YouTube in a YouTube clip about a VN, it's kind of hard to make that sound flashy,
Yeah, like there's only so much you could show in a YouTube video that really works for, showcasing the visual novel. But and what people are really interested for is a good story, even if they don't know it. Like, for example, they watch Clannad, they really like Clannad, they like all the fan art, everything, but they don't, even if their favorite character is Kyo, they don't, I don't want to say they don't know that they want it, but they don't have enough incentive to buy an expensive visual novel to experience it, I suppose I should say.
That makes sense.
Now, going back to one of your videos, Bruce, Hasumira, right? In that video, you mentioned that there was one particular heroine and route you really liked, and others not so much. Don't you feel like that makes some people discouraged experiencing that defining factor of VNs, of having multiple stories?
Hatsumira is an interesting case because it has like the longest common route I've ever experienced in a visual novel, which can be interesting, and I actually really liked it. But if you're not initially interested in the hook, you're not going to like it. Now, for the heroine, I really liked, it was the dog girl Alia, I believe, and I think she has a good route. And I was initially mad because you can't do her route immediately, but at the same time, that's also like 20 hours into the visual novel at that point. Like by the time you're like, half into a route and you're trying to figure it out. At that point, I don't know about you guys, but for me, once I'm at that point, I'm committed and I'm going to finish the visual novel. But for a lot of people, I feel like with that common route, they're not even going to get halfway if they're not interested.
I see.
That's kind of like a half answer to your question.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Going on a bit of a different train of thought, Bruce, what is your favorite visual novel?
My absolute favorite visual novel, I would have to say, is Little Busters.
Little Busters.
Yeah, Little Busters is so good. I really appreciate the story of friendship. Magic Coin also has it, but it's not quite there. It's just the playing, like the routes of all the characters, playing all the mini games with the characters. It really bonds you with the characters, and it really feels like you tie the bonds of friendship, and then the route happens. But that's a different thing. But you know what I mean. I haven't felt how I felt with Little Busters for any other visual novel. And I would absolutely recommend that visual novel to literally everybody. I don't know if you guys played it, but it's great.
Does that mean you're a huge fan of other key works?
I am relatively, yes. We've talked about Clannad 20 million times. So yeah, obviously Clannad. But specifically, rather than the later key works, I'd say I like the earlier ones. Air particularly has one of my favorite routes in the entirety of visual novel routes that I've read, and Canon's pretty good too. And maybe you guys are aware, but one recently released, which was by most of the original key staff, and that was also really good for me. I mostly finished with that, and I highly recommend it. But
you mentioned Air and it having one of the best routes ever. I'm not really familiar with Air. Could you tell me more about it? Like, without spoilers, hopefully?
So Air is an interesting one because it focuses on three main heroines, and it's very much like maybe what you know from Key. I feel like if you've read Clannad, like there are similar character types in it, but the story it tells in a condensed manner, I would say, is pretty beautiful. But the one thing that I really like about it, and my favorite route ever, is that it has a what do you call it? A background route, maybe like a pre-true route that goes way back in time to explain the story of it. And that's one of my favorite routes ever because it's I think it's only like 3-4 hours long, but it not only condenses what we know, what it leaks from the other routes for the lore, but it also writes a very compelling love story. And besides that, Air, I really like the older aesthetics of older visual novels, so yeah.
Did you start with Key? Or what was your first VN?
My first technically my first visual novel was one you probably never heard of called One Last Chance, but my first Japanese visual novel was The Fruit of Grisaya because I read Cat was Shoujo, and I was like, oh, I want more. I don't know how to say this politically correct, but I want more crippled girls, so I went to The Fruit of Grisaya.
Nice. Wow. Okay.
And from there, yeah, after that, I actually won a free giveaway from I don't know, Key's publisher, whoever publishes that, but I won a free copy of Clannad. And that not only like the Fruit of Grisaya was one thing, but Clannad made me realize that, holy, I really need to get into this. And I had Clannad on one monitor, and I was learning hiragana and katakana on the other monitor because I realized, oh my god, I need to learn Japanese. These things are great.
So Clannad was the one that made you finally click and okay,
yeah,
I'm in.
Clannad was the final key.
Okay. Oh, wow!
Ironically,
I see what you did there.
Yeah. So I take it that you really like the character-driven drama kinds of stories, right? Are there any other genres that you also enjoy?
Whilst that is typically the case, yes. I really like, for example, Higurashi Umineko mystery. I like all sorts of visual novels. The only ones I can say I confidently do not like are the ones mostly focused on H scenes. Unfortunately, for some viewers, I'm just really not into that. I can appreciate a good H scene here and there, especially if it helps the story, which I feel like is the case in, for example, If My Heart Had Wings is Kotori's wrote. But otherwise, for me, that's not it. But also, I'm interested in parodies of said genre, like, for example, Nukitashi, which is pretty much a parody of the entire H scene thing. I freaking love that. So I'm very versatile in my tastes, but if something's just like strictly for H, then maybe not.
Okay, I have a very Brucey-Lucy kind of question now. So prepare. Because I need to go to the bottom of it, okay? What's up with all the sisters, okay? Because recently, I have a feeling like whenever I watch your video, and I go down the list. For example, someone says, anyway, 99's best girl is still Sora, willing to die on that hill. Then, I read the Yosunagano Sora. Another one is a video about my little sister's special place. And, not to forget, a title you said you didn't enjoy, Saku Saku, but you said a fun Konami route dealing with incest was actually really good. What's up with that?
My man's pretty well read. Yeah. Yeah.
It's been pretty clear from my end too. I'm like, this guy seems to have some interesting tastes.
I don't really know. To be honest, I just like them. Maybe it's like I feel like maybe it's inherently just like something that maybe because you don't have it, you can get into it.
Okay.
I don't want to inherently explain why I'm into those weirder routes, but
But you just like them. They're just they're just peak character design.
I just like them. Like, that's a hard question, man. Like,
I told you it was very loose question.
If I explain it, I feel like my YouTube channel might be deleted. So
we'll save you. Okay.
But let me end that question on a note. I feel I often also like sister routes, so I'm on your side.
I would like to specifically say for Saku Saku and maybe Yosugu no Sora, but for Saku Saku specifically, it has a very interesting sister route in that there's a reoccurring mother character in the game, and and all the other characters are there, and to an extent they disapprove, and especially the mother character, like they literally sit you down. She literally sits you down, says like, you can't do that, that's bad, and it touches on the the forbidden aspects of said relationship.
Yeah, and
I feel like
treat it really seriously. They don't cop out with but not blood, the usual cop out. No, they treat it really seriously.
With 9-9 episode 2, nobody else mentions it, but I feel like it's ironic because I don't like Saku Saku as a whole, but I feel like that one route is probably the best little sister route that I've read, at least.
Okay.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks for the insights. On a different topic, what would you say is the biggest disappointment of a VN you've read? Something that you might have had high hopes for and it did not meet the mark.
Probably, if I had to only pick one, is Shiny Days.
You've got Shiny too Days. Many on your plate.
Yeah, well, my name is Brucegoneloose, not Bruce likes every single visual novel he reads. But nonetheless, Shiny Days. I mean, I didn't really like School Days, but School Days wasn't bad. You know, there were some good routes, and to be honest, I mostly read it for like the bad routes. But Shiny Days just feels like a worse version. I mean, technically, the original version was Summer Days, but nonetheless, it just doesn't do its routes very well or in an interesting manner. There are some bad ends that might be interesting to some people, and I was interested in them, but I couldn't be bothered to just go through the entire game. And I did mention it in the review I made of it, but the game for a lot of computers doesn't actually work, and you have to go through a pain in the ass process to just like make it work, and then it might just crash 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
So
as a person who completed Shiny Days, I agree. The technical problems were crazy. And just to answer your statement about the bad ends, right? When it comes to School Days, there's a lot of tension coming from the drama they created. And they really went on deep on that drama, right? And Shiny Days doesn't really have that. And I'll be honest, because I completed that, there's only one bad end in that game that has like 30, if not more. Only one, there's bad end.
And I'd like to mention too, like technically Shiny Days has like it's Shiny Days exclusive, not Summer Days, but they have like a route that's like based around a character.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of drama. The thing is, it's not really that interesting.
Yeah.
And it kind of just takes up too much time.
Oh, okay.
And then by the end of it, you just feel, wow, that's it.
You know what? Maybe drama wasn't the best word, but tension was high in School Days. Whereas in Shiny Days, there's barely any. Okay, fine, there is still some drama. Sure, fair enough. But very little tension. Nothing is... I don't know. Everything is like very blunt in a lot of aspects. So I understand.
I do agree in that aspect.
And speaking of disappointments, I have another question on that. What happened? Recently, I looked into Brucegoneloose videos, and you know what? I'm going to try to impersonate a Bruce. Okay. HoloLife's first ever official visual novel has just been released in English, and I've never been more excited. Where's the Bruceness, looseness? Where's the...
Wow, MR. Rude.
You tried your best. You tried your best. You've seen the video. I'm assuming you're asking more about the looseness and less about the actual visual novel.
Yeah.
For me, so once upon a time, it was actually sometime after my Katawa Shoujo video. So my name was still Bruce something. It had something to do with my last name. But I was looking for a new name because like I realized that like that wasn't a catchy name. And so I was bouncing things off of my friend. And I like so the first thing I thought of, well, this is like the third thing I thought of technically. So people love to rhyme with my name and call me things. Like people would call me Bruce the Goose or Bruce the Moose, or they call me Bruce or something stupid like that. And I realized people like that. I don't, but people like that. So I realized like, okay, what rhymes with my name? I think loose. And then I realized Brucegoneloose. Okay. And like I realized even from the get-go, it didn't really align with my personality because I'm an extremely patient person, funnily enough. But the origin of Brucegoneloose is exactly that. And then I just went with it, and nobody questioned it until literally now. And you're questioning why I'm called Brucegoneloose. I'll have to remember to make a really mad video for you guys.
Okay, but let there be no bad blood between us, so let's make a truce, Bruce, okay?
Okay. Truce rhymes with Bruce?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We'll make a truce. I will not go loose on your podcast, at least.
Yeah, and we'll talk later with a Bruce. Loose.
Yeah.
But is there a time in a visual novel when you have wanted to go most loosest? Something that just really pissed you off or got you angry, or just like, oh, I'm gonna go loose all over it?
There are very rarely cases that I feel like I need to completely destroy something inherently, but usually when that happens, I calm down. But if I really, well, if I had to pick one, I'd go back to Shiny Days. But to not retrack old ground, if there's one thing I really hated, it was Rika's route in Euphoria. That made me really, really mad. And like, well, the character herself made me mad, but it like maybe inherently the character, because of her actions, made me mad, and then throughout her route I was just mad. But like, I just hate that character so much.
Okay,
so much.
I'm not familiar with Euphoria nor the characters of the route stuff. Is she a character that you were supposed to get mad at, or was it you getting mad at the product?
I think
So
I think
Go
what because I read it. I think, and this is what I believe you might have issues if that route was very flippant. She was all over the place. Was that it?
I'm asking Bruce.
Because that's what I got an impression from.
it's also that, but it's also the fact that like she's just so manipulative. Like she's just not a good character inherently.
So
I mean,
so she's like a villain who you are very much supposed to get mad at.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. She's a heroine and she's a part of the main cast, but to me, she is a villain and she is someone that I will inherently hate. So, in that sense, yeah. If we're talking about like maybe a more reasonable visual novel that isn't like completely insane, maybe somebody I got mad at was what's her name? I'm blanking, but there's this one character that I really hated in the visual novel, and I guess again manipulation. I just really hate that aspect of characters, and it does not sit well with me. So any character that inherently tries to manipulate the protagonist, even if it's just slightly, it just makes me gross to their character. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Totally.
Especially the example you brought, Rika. I understand now, because she feigned innocence a lot of the time. That was her shtick.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of thing
I
just makes me gross. That's all I can say to that matter.
Well, on that note, I think we'll have to wrap it up for this week's episode. Thank you so much for stopping by, Brucegoneloose. I hope you had a blast for today.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. Can't believe it's already been, the time. Holy heck.
It was nice finally getting to know you after all that time staying in touch. But thank you again, and thanks to all our listeners. Venture out.
Venture out.